Prologue 1 of 2. The universe and everything beyond it follows a great unknowable pattern. The why and the how of this pattern has been lost to time, but it's sufficient to understand that things have a startling tendency towards similarity across all of time and space. That is to say, things, beings, places, and concepts have a tendency to appear and repeat themselves throughout the universe regardless of what one believes should or should not exist. The humanoid is a basic five-pronged being that tends toward upright mobility and is a staple of the universe's life forms. It's a good design, fairly durable, with endless customization options. Some of the weakest and some of the most powerful species in existence all share the common humanoid design. The pattern even accounts for a certain range of behaviors common to all humanoids. A laugh is a laugh in every galaxy, a smile is a smile, and a glare is a glare. A space elf is a fairly standard humanoid creature with a few customizations. They're universally pretty, immune to shame, and their ears are terribly long. Their society is organized in a fashion that, while highly advanced, would be recognizable to a human. With this in mind, when I say Aldous Devine, a space elf, was just democratically elected president for life of his entire galaxy, it's not without some awareness of how absurd that statement is. Oh, Aldous was so happy. Space elves have a lifespan which measures in the hundreds of thousands of years, and this election had been going on for at least 1,000. Even for a space elf, that's quite a long time to focus on one thing. Consequently, Aldous Devine had just come off of the mother of all victory parties. That is to say, he'd just come back from a very refreshing orgy which had consumed his entire home planet for the better part of 5 years. He'd reconnected with old flames, made a lot of friends, done a lot of highly refined drugs, and accepted huge sums in bribes, but only in public and on the record. He even took the time to donate his genetic material to one of the cradle worlds, where his offspring would be born from a machine and be free to struggle with their fellows until they were old enough to connect with the larger space elf population. If he were extremely lucky, he thought, they would not survive. Or if he were less lucky, they would survive, but he wouldn't have to meet them. Yes, Aldous Devine was an absolute paragon of moral virtue, at least in the sense that space elves measured things like morality, which was not often and without conscience. He is not, of course, the main character of the story. That's Ben, and he'll show up soon enough. The poor lad has just been approved for the first real vacation of his adult life, and he's packing his luggage. He can't decide if he's going to bring a bunch of sci-fi books with him to Hawaii or not. Oh, Ben. Laying down on his bed in his one-bedroom apartment, he shut his eyes, letting his life wash over him, feeling the gratitude he ought to feel towards the people who have selflessly assisted him in his life, asking for nothing in return. He'd worked hard as well, and was reaping the sweet fruits of success. Let him savor the feeling of victory. Aldous Devine certainly was. The elf stood tall at the mouth of a great shining cavern, an enormous staircase leading down into the dark. Everything was made of a white, shining, opal-like substance, including the entire featureless surface of the planet. He was alone and savoring the moment. It was all his now. Everything. Forever. Or at least as long as he could keep his tight fist clenched around life. He'd lied and cheated and betrayed his way to the top of a society of the greatest liars, cheaters, and betrayers in the whole universe. He had absolute power over them now. The full might of the Empire trembled at his voice, eager to fulfill his commands, no matter how aberrant or abominable or awful. He would fulfill every desire till his brain was numb, then he would reset his mind to pure innocence and debase himself again, over and over, forever. Endless passion, endless pleasure, endless power. He would also, at some point, devote some of his time to making sure the gravy train didn't stop running and that the Empire didn't collapse. Honestly, this was the easiest and best job in the entire universe. The Empire had been running itself for a literal eon without anything more than the occasional poke and prod from the central government, which was mostly ornamental as far as the average citizen was concerned. All of their major threats had been extinguished and banished to the system, which was a convenient dumping ground for all problems. All the flaws and imperfections of their species had long ago been polished away, giving them bodies which were optimized for pleasure and eternity in what they considered to be paradise. His steps were graceful, his body was slender and lithe, his hair was white and hung down his back, and his ears were just impractically long. Like every other member of his species, he had a supremely punchable face and would give anyone looking at him an uncomfortable boner. Aldous practically floated down the steps. The surface of the planet was barren of all life, a shining shell of rainbow white, like the inside of an oyster. Space elves loved to brag, and many a prisoner of war had heard their torturer talk about the capital planet, how valuable and unique it was, how it took 1,000,000 years to grow the giant, gentle, sentient space oyster, and 10 million more before the planet had finished forming, about how they had killed the sentient, peaceful being and feasted on its body. Its psychic screams were recorded and available for purchase. That precious, planet-sized pearl had been carefully carved out by the system, who had also provided the baby giant space oyster to begin with, and turned it into their capital planet. Speaking from a perspective of absolute fairness to the space elves, it was a gorgeous planet. It was unique. It was valuable. Only a human would have thought it wasn't worth the price. Aldous descended down the opal steps into a dark cavern in the planet's interior. The planet itself was hollow and contained the central government. After all, they wouldn't want to mar the beauty and perfection of the planet's surface with something as common as government buildings. His thoughts were not the sort of thing anyone but a psychologist or a priest were equipped to deal with. His mind was occupied by all the depraved, formerly illegal things he was going to do. How he was going to be able to get anything he wanted from the system, about how all those who had been thrown in there would suffer from his requests, about how he would delight from that suffering. Aldous Devine was the paragon of being a total fucking dirtbag. At least insofar as how humans measured morality, which was constantly and with great pain. Aldous looked back one last time, savoring the sight of space. It was frustrating how beautiful it was on the surface of that planet. How awe-inspiring the view was, if only it hadn't been created by such a wretched people as them. The capital planet was situated in an artificial solar system. What had once been a completely empty, blank pocket of space in their galaxy had been carefully engineered to have way too many suns, one of each color, an asteroid field of literal moon-sized gemstones, and a few gas giants with spectacular rings thrown in as an afterthought. The astro engineers who designed it were still having nightmares about the maintenance plan. They just knew some president for life was going to demand they change out the light bulbs when a sun got a bit off color. Indeed, Aldous Devine, who continued his walk, cackled to himself at the thought of doing just that. He would promote one of his old rivals, who was an astro-engineer, to the head of the project and then drop that massive pile of shit on his desk. Aldous pictured it. He would be standing out there, gazing at the spectacular sight with Drevis Swift, his old rival. He would make Drevis stand there for a few days while he pondered, and then he would point at the purple star and say, "Don't you think that one looks a little off? No, it definitely looks off. I don't think we'll be able to update it. It needs to be replaced. President's orders." And then Aldous would pat old Drevis on the head and walk away and probably mate with whoever Drevis was keen on at the moment. It was actually one of his campaign promises. Not Drevis specifically, but that he would humiliate all of his old rivals and share the details with the public. They loved that sort of thing. It might have even won him the election, but that was a matter of fierce debate among the public. It's worth mentioning that all the other candidates had already quietly taken their own lives, which was both tradition and a fate far preferable to the endless humiliation subjected on those who had dared run against the winner. The capital planet was a king's jewel, situated upon a cosmic crown in space. Clouds of vibrant gas floated in the region, dressing even the darkness of space in beauty. The surface of the world wasn't perfectly smooth, instead having a rolling, almost bumpy texture. It caught the light better, giving a wonderful contrast of light and shadow. It was also so terribly quiet. There was no wind, not on the surface, merely the simple circulation of air. A bleak, sterile, awful beauty that shone so bright it would burn the eyes. Space elves were good at creating things like that. Aldous did wonder, with a sense of barely restrained glee, what had caused the previous president for life to abdicate his position. It had never happened before. The special election, which had consumed the galaxy for the last 1,000 years, was an anomaly in an otherwise smooth historical pattern. What sort of sordid secrets would he learn? The former president wasn't that old either. Sure, he was approaching the last 250,000 years of his life, but he was still in his prime. If he wanted to, he could extend his life practically indefinitely. The man had been president for life. There were options available to him that weren't available to anyone else. So why? Why ever quit? Another of Aldous' campaign promises, one he fully intended to break, was to tell the public all the details. But no, that secret would be for him and him alone. Nobody could hold him to it anyways. There wasn't a process in place to remove him from his office, and anyone who tried to make noises about that would be thrown into the system, a fate far worse than death. He reached the bottom of the grand entrance, half expecting a parade and fully expecting another absolute apocalyptic rager of a party. But there was no parade, no music, and no food. Just a very old elf who was about to give up the best job in the universe, standing alone in a gigantic, gaudy entrance hall. So, the ancient rabbit wanted to do it like that, eh? Fine. The party was inevitable and would go on forever anyways. Aldous only got to do this once. "Are you prepared?" Dremian Devine asked. An expression of... Aldous struggled to find the right word for what he saw. It was a foreign emotion to space elves, but it did exist in them. "Why do you seem concerned?" Light of the Empire?" Aldous asked, using one of the 10,000 titles for the position and using it with a hint of sarcasm. "Come with me. I have evacuated the planet and will conduct your orientation. What we say will stay between us forever." Aldous kept his body language composed, but inwardly he was both confused and a little put out. Then he looked around and realized that the two of them were well and truly alone, so he relaxed. Aldous shrugged and let his emotions play across his face, one side of his mouth raising and an eyebrow going up. It was an expression that said, "Okay, whatever, dude." "The entire planet?" Aldous asked, struggling to keep up with Dremian's brisk pace. This was all wrong, he thought. Nobody walks this fast, ever. "You will soon see." They walked in silence after that, and eventually reached the heart of the planet, the seat of power of their entire empire, the glorious throne— oh, wait. Dremian took a hard left and led them to a different room. This room was more functional than magnificent. It had no chairs and was occupied by a holoprojector in the center of the room. It was positively ancient, a heavy square box set low into the floor with a large, smooth dome recessed on the top of it. "Do you know the history of our position, its origins?" Dremian abruptly asked as he waved his hands over the ancient piece of technology. Aldous almost snickered when he realized the piece of garbage actually had to warm up. "Naturally. As the Empire expanded, a central ruling body was required." "No!" Dremian said, cutting Aldous off. "No?" Aldous asked, starting to get a little pissed off now. This was his day, the best day of his life, and some fossil was trying to haze him. "No! This position exists for one simple, awful purpose." "And what's that, Dremian?" Aldous asked, sarcasm dripping from his words. "We exist to keep the humans contained, Aldous. That is our only job. That is why the whole might of the Empire is at our, and now your, disposal. Because even everything we have is not enough." The silence stretched between them, and an abrupt hum came from the holoprojector. It came to life, and a blue planet with green continents was displayed, hovering at eye level with the two space elves. It was, if I would be so bold, a fetching and naturally beautiful planet, and a jewel to surpass anything the elves had ever created. Aldous stared at the blue planet, his face a completely blank politician's mask. Aldous continued to stare, the seconds stretching into an uncomfortable minute, and then into 10 of them. They were by far the most awkward, uncomfortable 10 minutes either of them had ever experienced in their long, long lives. Dremian glanced at the blue planet, and then at the face of his replacement. "Aldous," Dremian said, "you weren't honestly expecting this position to be an endless party, were you? You must have thought to yourself that there had to be more to being the warden of the Empire than endless pleasure and privilege." Aldous' long ears twitched, and he gently coughed, never taking his eyes off of the hologram, still pretending to be staring at it in profound thought. "Not even a single time? In a 1,000-year election?" Dead silence. By the rainbow stars of the capital, we are so fucked, Dremian said, his face giving way to an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. Prologue 2 of 2. Dremian staggered back a few steps, till his back was against the wall and his legs flexed, pushing him up against it hard. His eyes were wild and unfocused, and even though their species had genetically removed most kinds of fear, he was about to have a panic attack. Then, abruptly, his biology kicked in, and he was no longer feeling negative emotions. A small, almost stupid smile replaced the terror, and his legs slowly gave out. He slid down the wall, landing on his butt, chuckling darkly as he pulled out a flask. No, we were already fucked. I shouldn't try and put all the blame on you any more than I already am. Dremian took a drink and motioned for Aldous to come over. Aldous had never said no to drinking on the job his entire life, and he wasn't about to start now. He walked over and put his back against the wall to slide down like Dremian had until the two were level and sitting close. At least close for how a human would measure it. Space Elves' concept of personal space included skin-to-skin contact only. There was no personal bubble. You said nobody is ever going to know what we said here? Aldous asked, taking a drink and then taking another, longer drink before handing the flask back. Bah! Forget about your image, you won! Nobody can touch you now except me, and only until I officially pass on the title. Speak as freely as you want, you're the warden now. Aldous once again felt the familiar shudder, the thrill that came with absolute power. It's as you said, then. I have no idea what's going on right now. I'm being too hard on you, Dremian said, and silence followed. He took a drink from the bottomless flask, a flask of holding. It's worth mentioning that old quote about sufficiently advanced technology being indistinguishable from magic, because the flask was also enchanted to create whatever highly potent and illegal substance the galactic leaders were consuming. Aldous had to stare, because nobody ever admitted fault in the Empire. Space Elves just didn't do that, no matter how much they drank. It made him uncomfortable. Too hard, Dremian said with a sigh, setting the flask on Aldous' lap and standing up on steady feet. Space Elves had prioritized several things in their vision of genetic perfection, and near the top of that list was the ability to get way more drunk, stoned, fucked up, high, low, basically all the states of intoxication, without suffering any loss in function or having any long-term health problems. Dremian was drunk. Probably drunker than most humans could get without dying, but that wasn't going to stop him or Aldous from getting through this conversation. Dremian took brisk steps toward the holoprojector and began waving his hands around in the air, operating it. Aldous internally scoffed at the need to physically operate the device. Really, who bothered to keep anything without psychic controls? The planet, which was obviously Earth, blurred for a moment before reforming, this time showing all the lights of civilization that crisscrossed the planet. Satellites orbited and had their orbital paths projected by thin lines. I bet you're wondering about the fossil, Dremian said, slapping the holoprojector fondly. It's from the age of the primordial war, way back at the dawn of the universe. This little chunk of genius allows for something to be viewed in real time without projecting any psychic presence or allowing any psychic connection to form with the viewer. That's very important in psychic warfare. How does it work? No idea. It has a maintenance plan and we stick to it. The projector is interesting, but who cares? He said, pointing at the Earth. That's Terra, the only planet in the universe with humans. Aldous was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He stood up, only slightly less drunk than Dremian, and got closer to the projection. Primitive, he said softly, his big, advanced space elf brain functioning like a computer. Aldous began operating the hologram and selected a satellite, zooming in on it. Very primitive. He was frowning now, and zoomed out to get a picture of the solar system. There were a few orbit rings around Mars, and Aldous selected the one that stood out to him. What is that? Some sort of personal vehicle? Did they think they could travel space in a Tesla? He said, rolling the unfamiliar word around with his tongue. He abruptly felt his mental defense system activate, as though something had briefly and weakly attempted to break into his mind. Dremian chuckled. I'd be careful saying too many Terran words, Aldous, Dremian said, tapping his skull with a finger. That planet is absolutely infested with predatory psychic life. Noted, Aldous said dryly, reviewing the attack and then rolling his eyes at how weak it had been. He continued to review the planet, only stopping to drink, and began laughing when he realized what the roads were made out of. Tar and pebbles. What a bunch of primitive savages. Oh, I get it now, Dremian. This was a funny joke. Those vehicles are strange. They're belching out smoke almost like something is burning, Aldous said, watching a lone car on a highway at night, evidently trying to puzzle out how it functioned. That's a car, Aldous. This is my first lesson about humans, and it should tell you everything you need to know about them, Dremian said, pulling up an animated schematic of an internal combustion engine. Lesson number 1. A human being is perfectly comfortable with the idea of strapping themselves into a highly unstable active bomb and using it for the purpose of transportation. A bomb? Aldous said, eyebrows raising up in alarm as his mind caught up and realized the obvious. A bomb? By the stars, that's madness! That can't be safe, he said, looking to Dremian. Lesson number 2. It's not. At all. And the humans know that. One of the leading causes of death on their planet are these transportation bombs, but they refuse to stop using them. Go ahead and keep looking around, Aldous. I'm enjoying this, seeing someone else go through it all. Aldous did continue, all traces of humor evaporating as the puzzle pieces began to come out of hiding. Aldous had found the Midwest of the U.S. now, and was looking at a massive field of corn. Ah, that's their food, then? Corn? Aldous said, reading the label of the hologram placed over the field. They must need to eat a lot of it, judging by how much they're growing, Aldous said, and Dremian had a look of anticipatory schadenfreude on his face. Oh! Aldous said, suddenly exclaiming in delight. No, they've got 2 food sources, corn and wheat. I wonder what the ratio is between the 2. What's this now? Potatoes? Some sort of root? So 3 food sources? That's a little bit excessive. What are those structures? Aldous said, zooming in on a building next to the farmhouse. Chickens? Why, in the name of the Empire, would they have an enclosure full of useless birds? Dremion gave him a level look and stared at him. They can eat chickens as well, Aldous asked, but it was more of a statement than a question. So they have 4 kinds of food then, right? If you had to guess, just based on what you've seen, how many kinds of food do you think a human can eat without any kind of processing? Dremion asked the question with a sly look on his face. Aldous knew it was a trick question. He was no fool. Being able to eat both 3 different kinds of plants and chickens without chemical processing already gave them the most diverse palate out of any species he'd ever heard of. I'll bet they can eat any kind of white meat and any kind of green plant, Aldous said, referencing an ancient, monstrous species that had been defeated by the Empire. Their species' name, roughly translated, was the Mouth of the Void, and they'd earned it. Dremion smiled and savored the silence between them. No, he finally said. They are a class of organism which is unique to Terra. They are omnivores. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Its psychic presence rooted in Dremion, seeking access to Aldous' mind. It was gradual, working its way slowly through the layers of psychic checkpoints, filtering through mental machinery, processed, and finally broken down and understood. Omni, which meant all, everything, infinite. Vor, which means to eat, to consume, to digest. Omnivore, the one who will devour infinity. Aldous took an involuntary step back, seeing the farm and, indeed, the planet with new eyes. Anything. Without technology. Without processing. Anything? He asked, his eyes pleading with Dremion. Anything, Dremion replied, taking obvious satisfaction at Aldous' distress. Could they eat us? Stars? No wonder we're keeping them contained, Aldous said, suddenly filled with purpose. But the moment I'm in charge, I'm exterminating them. Why haven't we exterminated them yet? Where is Terra anyways? Dremion closed his eyes and sighed, taking an almost erotic pleasure in the next part of the explanation. Oh, you want to know where Terra is? Why, it's located in the heart of the dead galaxy, didn't you know? Wasn't that obvious? The Empire was not situated in the Milky Way galaxy, which was known as the Dead Galaxy to everyone else. The Empire was a galactic neighbor in the same way people living in the deep country can call the only other family for 15 miles around their house a neighbor. Everybody knew about the Dead Galaxy, though it was a source of endless speculation, a bit like Antarctica is on Earth. The official story was this. The Dead Galaxy was dangerous, and nobody was allowed in for their own safety. There had been some sort of ancient cosmic war that polluted the entire thing, and if anyone went inside, they would be contaminated, get sick, and die. If the Empire caught you before you got sick and died, they would cull you. No questions asked. According to the official story, the contamination was contagious and a threat to all life in the Empire. Nobody tried to go in. Oh, Aldous said. Yes, I suppose it was obvious. So these humans are living in a pocket of the dead galaxy that's free of contamination? I guess they won't be getting out of there, and who would want to run a suicide mission? Why are you laughing? There's no contamination, Aldous. That whole galaxy exists for the singular purpose of keeping them confined to a single planet. The galaxy is barren of all life, so that whenever the humans turn their sights on the stars, they hear nothing, see nothing, and feel nothing, save for a sense of absolute loneliness. Do you know why? Why? Aldous asked, feeling nothing but a sense of superiority and power, feeling that even for the Empire this was an impressive punishment for an enemy. Aldous felt a warm glow of pride in his chest. Why? Because if they even got a hint that there was anything out there, even the faintest whiff of it, they would leave their planet and start to spread out. You asked why we haven't eradicated them yet, yes? Would you like to guess? We're keeping them as a trophy, Aldous said, feeling smug. It's obvious. Dremian chuckled again and shook his head. No, Aldous, but good guess. It was a trick question, because we have eradicated them before, thousands of times. If I'm being perfectly honest, the Warden's main job is to eradicate humanity, to destroy them when they reach a certain point of advancement and start the clock over. Take some time to process that, Aldous. Have we bombarded the planet? Aldous asked, mentally going down the Empire's official doctrine on how to exterminate a species, something that, until this moment, Aldous thought their species had completely mastered. Yes, but we missed a few of them, and they recovered within 1,000 years, Dremian replied. That fast? How quickly do they reproduce? A little more than one child per year on average per female if they are reproducing in a hurry. How long to maturity? Aldous asked. About 14 years at the soonest, Dremian explained. Though it's worth noting he used the space elf way of measuring time and that I've converted it to something coherent. You're welcome. By the system, Aldous swore. Lifespan? 100 years, give or take, though the females will stop being able to produce offspring after they're about 50. So one female could produce 40 children in her fertility cycle, roughly speaking? Yes, which is part of the problem, Dremian said. Have we irradiated the planet? Yes. It didn't work. Bioweapons? Aldous asked, voice hopeful. Dremian scowled. That was a terrible mistake. One of our predecessors released the Gorvix strain. Translation, E. coli. On Terra. Then, for good measure, he released hundreds of weapons-grade adaptable microorganisms on the planet. He figured it would take care of the problem. That's a war crime in any other situation. What happened? Were a few of them able to isolate themselves long enough for the weapons to become inert? Aldous asked. No, most of them died. And then they kept dying for a few hundred years. Actually, it succeeded in wiping out all animal life on Terra, at least for a little while. Most of the plants, too. That particular warden was incredibly pleased with himself and enjoyed a few million years of peace and quiet. In fact, it was so quiet that he forgot to keep checking up on the planet every 500 years or so like he was supposed to. Care to guess what happened, Aldous? The humans were all dead. What did it matter? Wrong. That is the mistake made over and over. The humans re-evolved from scratch, all the way from the microorganism stage, and this time they came back highly resistant to any and all types of bioweapons. Their bodies invented something they call an immune system. And now the Gorvik strain lives in their stomachs and helps digest their food even more efficiently. It's a bit like a miniature version of the system, but on the biological level. That's impossible on multiple levels. What about a psychic assault? Aldous asked. Same problem as the bio attack. You see, they now have two minds, one of which is entirely without consciousness. That is to say, the humans are completely unaware that it even exists. It digests psychic entities and is constantly generating new psychic life forms. It's a bit like a version of the system, but on a mental level. Dremian snorted, like he'd just made a joke. It also made them into the first, and only, as far as I know, post-logic species. Post-logic? What in the world are you talking about? Then Dremian started to explain the miracle, or the horror, that was humanity. About why they couldn't just fly a fleet in and occupy the dead galaxy and spend the next 1,000,000 years systematically eradicating every speck of life. Simply put, humans did not need to understand something in order to build and operate it. The greatest fear of previous wardens was that some moron would fly an advanced spacecraft by Earth, that humans would see it, and then, in 100 years, produce a perfect replica, or worse, a better spacecraft. Why? Because humans were post-logic. They did not have to follow a sequential chain of events to come to an idea. They were able to generate facts and ideas which were completely unsupported by any logical framework. Worse was that these post-logical ideas could then be used to generate a logical framework, almost as if by some sort of evil magic. A normal mind could be visualized as a single beautiful tree of logic, rooted in fundamental truth, with nothing floating around and all its branches connected to the trunk. The human mind was a world with thousands of evil floating tree people, with no leaves and sharp branches, sitting in the lotus position and radiating a kind of evil enlightenment and occasionally laughing a dry, sinister chuckle. Forget about their seeming ability to come back from a single fragment of DNA from any species on Earth, or the fact that any planet that is infected with human DNA will generate an infinite variety of plant, animal, fungal, marine, and psychic life, in addition, Aldous was shouting now, to guaranteeing that humans will somehow magically arise in that environment no matter what. Aldous was breathing hard. He was furious with Dremian for telling him this, and with humanity for being impossible. No, I don't believe this bit of nonsense. This post-logic, Aldous' voice dripped with venom and contempt, is completely impossible. Yes, it is, Dremian said, a sly look on his face. But it's also true. Aldous almost growled, then realized Dremian really was telling him the truth. He fell over landing on his butt, staring at the hollow projection of the earth. "By death," he swore. "Where did these things come from? You cannot expect me to believe they are natural, because there is nothing more unnatural in the universe than what you've described to me." "Well," Dremian said, "you remember the Primordial War?" The Primordial War. The first event in the universe. In fact, it was the exact moment the war ended that the universe came to be. Yet it had always existed. At least that was what the scientists said. Or rather, what the scientists said the data said. If those scientists were pressed for answers, they'd start to sweat and use very large, confusing words before running away. Nobody was super clear on the details of the war, and none of the original combatant species were still alive, except the humans. And they'd forgotten everything. The war had been universal in scale, and the wreckage and remains were scattered across every galaxy. Strange, impossible things, devices which seemed to operate on an entirely different set of physical laws. It was as though the rules of reality hadn't been set in stone before the war was over. The Primordial War had a history. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It was the sort of war that predated reality and consciousness and matter. Children were told it was the war between the forces which wanted things to exist and the forces which did not want things to exist. For most of the war, the bad guys, and they were bad guys, were winning. They had the home field advantage, so to speak, because, according to the stories, nothing existed, and they just had to keep it that way. Then, in a fit of mad desperation, the good guys, they were probably good guys, created a weapon greater than themselves. They were fury, the reapers of havoc, born to do battle, nursed upon anger and without compassion. More than a weapon. Born without sorrow, with a crown of menace upon their head. Human. History, or what can be found of it, got a little funny after that. Carvings had been defaced and documents destroyed. Clear evidence of a historical purge. What is clear, however, is that the humans had won the good guys the war. How do we know that? Because, well, the universe exists in actuality, rather than just as a probability in cosmic soup. "How did they end up on just one planet, then?" Aldous asked. "And why don't we just—" "Aldous," Dremian said. "Shut up. That doesn't matter. Your job is easy and comfortable. Cull the humans. Keep them from expanding and consuming the entire universe. Don't let them become aware that they aren't alone. Just follow the rules and read the notes of the previous wardens. You'll do great," Dremian said, slowly edging towards the door as he spoke. "It doesn't seem that hard," Aldous said, then narrowed his eyes. "Why are you quitting, then?" "Just got tired of it," Dremian said, starting to move faster towards the door. "Nobody gets tired of it. Nobody has ever quit. What's going on with the humans?" "Nothing!" Dremian shouted, now running towards the exit. "I don't know anything about it! They're your problem now! I'm evacuating this galaxy and getting on the other side of the universe! Fuck you!" Aldous felt a sharp pain in his arm. He looked down and saw the dart. Then Aldous went to sleep. When he woke up, he was alone. and the ruler of an entire galaxy. He just had one simple, easy responsibility. So he sat down and started digging through the data stored in the primordial hollow projector, and slowly, so slowly, he began to realize the problem. It was spelled out so perfectly in the previous warden's data, in charts and spreadsheets, in pure math. Humanity was going to break the quarantine around Earth within the next 10 years. And there was nothing he or anyone could do about it. Chapter 1. Ben was a human in an airport in Arizona. He had no idea that a dirtbag space elf was peeping in on his intestines and frantically examining the smelly contents while taking notes and saying things like, "Oh no," and "That's impossible," and "We're so fucked." Ben, if he'd been given the choice to know that or not know that, he would have gladly chosen ignorance, because today was the day. Yes, finally. After 1.5 years of sacrifice, Ben had saved up enough time off and money to go on the first real vacation of his adult life. No parents, no friends, no real reason to do it save that Ben wanted to. No girlfriend, and for the first time, Ben was really happy to be single, because that meant he was truly, truly free to do whatever he wanted. I joke about his 1.5 years of sacrifice, but really, Ben had been working his ass off. No days off at all, working voluntary overtime and taking the hours as compensatory time off rather than money, and, well, that's all he really did. Oh, he also started going to the gym about 9 months ago, and he's looking pretty good. If he were standing next to a bodybuilder, he'd still look a little skinny, but if he stood next to a regular dude, he'd at least look a little better. He'd also gotten a nice haircut, bought new clothes, and watched some YouTube videos for tips on how to groom his facial hair and make it look neater. All in all, Ben looked good, felt good, and was about to go to Hawaii for like a month. I know, Hawaii, baby's first vacation destination, but what the hell did Ben know about where to go? He'd just woken up one morning 1.5 years ago and said, "Fuck, I'm 28 years old and I've never taken a real vacation in my life. I've got a good job. I just got the first real no-joke promotion in my life, and if I play my cards right, I could go to Hawaii with thousands and thousands of disposable dollars burning a hole in my pocket." Ben had been fortunate enough to get a city job when he was about 25. His city wasn't the biggest city in his state, which wasn't Arizona. He only stopped by Arizona to visit his parents. What state did Ben live and work in? Doesn't matter, because, spoiler alert, he's never going back there, and he's never going to see a single speck of dirt from that place again. If anyone asked Ben how he felt about his job when he was 26, about 1 year after he got hired, he would have had a pained, tired expression on his face and said, "It's a good job, it pays well, and I have full benefits. It's a career, and I can do my entire life without worrying about getting fired. We're in a union. I didn't know city workers were in unions." Ben would have done his best to put a good face on it, but the truth was, Ben started at the bottom of the ladder. A guy who dug ditches with a shovel. An unskilled laborer. A well-paid laborer with really good health care, a retirement plan that would actually support him in retirement, union-mandated breaks, and a really generous vacation and sick leave package. But still a fucking laborer, working for a bunch of old guys who couldn't figure out why Ben didn't want to get a CDL and drive a dump truck for the rest of his life like them. Ben had suffered for his decision to remain a laborer, to pass up promotion opportunities, and for his general lack of interest in football and car maintenance as a topic of interesting conversation. Ben had been a hard worker, and everybody noticed. Then, when he was about 27, he started applying for other jobs in different parts of the city government. He applied to work in the offices, doing office work. He didn't get it. He tried to apply for a position in the warehouse, running a forklift and doing warehouse stuff. He made number 1 on the list, and didn't get it. Ben was in agony by that point. The process of getting from application to interview took like 5 months, and he'd been passed over twice. He worried that if it happened again, people would start to think there was something seriously wrong with him, that there was a good reason nobody wanted to give him a job in their department. Gossip and rumors moved faster than fire in the city, and Ben realized some of the rumors might be about him. It was then that he started doing some hardcore self-examination, just really throwing himself into the process of figuring out just what the hell was wrong with himself, which turned out to be a lot. This was good for Ben, though, because he figured out that he was terrible in job interviews. Up until that point, Ben had been working shitty job after shitty job, the kinds of work that took anyone who applied, in the order they applied. He'd been a cashier, a construction worker, a theater employee, and a bunch of other things. He'd even done crime scene cleanup for like a year, and had seen some pretty traumatic shit. He always ended up quitting, because he realized the job was a dead end, or that it would never pay enough for him to be a real adult, or that he would blow his own brains out if he kept going at it. Those kinds of jobs had interviews that were short and mostly procedural, because if you had gotten the interview, you had already gotten the job. Even his interview to get hired as a laborer for the city had been a bit of a joke. "Can you hold a shovel?" "Yes, sir, I can." "Will you come to work visibly drunk ever?" "No, sir, I won't." "Hire this man immediately." His last 2 interviews, which had been real interviews, had gone terribly. "Can you please explain to me a conflict you've had with a supervisor?" Hang on, let me think about it. "Oh, my last boss at," insert specific company name here, "was a total tightwad, you know?" He actually said her real name in an interview. "Came up to us one day and started complaining about money, and I was thinking to myself about how much money she was making versus how much she was paying us, and it didn't really sit right with me. I mean, I've seen the invoices we send out." Then he talked himself into a hole and talked shit about his former boss for like 2 minutes straight. Oh. Okay. Next question. Can you tell me about a conflict you've had with a coworker? The interviewer winced at that point, because Ben perked up and said, "Okay, I've had plenty of those." Then at some point, Ben had referenced a company he'd worked for but forgot to put on his resume. Then the interviewer had started flipping through his resume and said, I can't find that one. What was its name?" And then Ben completely forgot the name of the place because he'd only worked there 2 months through a temp agency. Then the interviewer asked what the name of the temp agency had been, and Ben also blanked on that one. When the interviewer asked if he even remembered the name of his boss from that job, Ben started to sweat. Boy, is it getting hot in here, or is it just me? It had gone so badly that a literal voice spoke into his mind during an uncomfortable silence and said, like God's verdict, "You will never get this job." So Ben, realizing his problem, got professional help. No, not a psychologist. He probably needed one, but he hired the next best thing. He hired a professional interviewer. Ben worked with them every week for 3 months, once a week for about 3 hours per session with homework. Ben spent every morning reading interview questions, thinking not about how to answer them correctly, but if he would be able to give an honest answer to them. He dug deep into his professional history and began to review nearly everything that he'd ever done in a new and critical way. In a way, he'd been handed the tools he needed to grow from his experiences, and in the process of that growth came up with some absolutely killer answers to any questions he got asked. He began to realize things about himself that he'd never noticed before, and in the process of preparing for what he considered his final shot at getting out of his shitty, bottom-of-the-ladder job, he became a better employee and a better person. He found that he was able to act like he was in an interview almost at all times, but not in an annoying way, in a way that made people stand up and be like, wow, Ben's taking his job seriously. I can respect that. Then he interviewed, and his hard work paid off. The interviewer shook his hand at the end and said, "That was a wonderful interview, really good job," which was a great improvement because the last guy who interviewed him would literally ignore and run away from Ben if he ever had the misfortune to cross paths. The guy would blow his cheeks out, and his eyes would get wide like he was remembering something that caused him physical pain. Yes, Ben had just come from an absolutely wholesome journey of self-discovery and growth. He got the job. He got the big pay raise. He outranked all those jerks who looked down on him, and now his rivals looked like they just sucked on a lemon. His new co-workers liked and respected him, and son of a bitch, Ben was really, really good at his new job. He felt like he was finally doing something that really allowed his best qualities to shine, and he felt like he had a good shot of running the entire department someday. He deserved this fucking vacation, man. Ben had just become a real fucking adult, just become the kind of person a good woman would look at and say, "I'd like to marry that competent, respectful, decent-looking man with a capital M." And he might even have met her in Hawaii. It's a real crime that he wasn't ever going to make it to Hawaii. Oh, spoiler alert, but Aldous Devine, the Warden of the Empire, the Light of the Empire, the Keeper of the System, had just finished examining the contents of the last few feet of Ben's large intestines and realized that if a human ever took a shit or even farted on another planet, that it would be an apocalyptic event for the native population. Then Aldous started to concoct a desperate, dangerous solution. "There's no time," Aldous muttered to himself. "Not enough of it anyways. Not enough for anything else. That fucking rabbit!" Aldous screamed, picked up a data crystal and threw it as hard as he could against a wall, where it shattered with a loud, sharp noise. The pieces tinkled as they fell to the ground, and Aldous screamed and threw another crystal, then another, then another. The crystals, well, they were the journals of Dremian, the former Warden of the Empire, and contained all the information about what Dremian had done to keep the humans on Earth. He'd started off enthusiastic enough, triggering a Rube Goldbergian series of events that would cause Earth's sun to occasionally shoot out a massive flare that would utterly devastate the humans' ability to develop technology. Then he sent a bunch of new bioweapons towards Earth on a comet, which only took about 20,000 years to get there. If an Empire destroyer, their fastest class of ship that could deliver devastation on a planetary scale, were to rush to Earth as fast as they were capable, they might make the journey in 2,000 years. Lesson number 1 about space travel. Going from one galaxy to another galaxy takes a very, very long time, even for a highly advanced transgalactic empire. And yes, that 2,000 years is spent in a wormhole, or hyperspace, or whatever anyone wants to call it. It still takes a very long time. 10 years to break quarantine. They might as well already be spreading around their galaxy. "That moron!" Aldous shouted, having run out of data crystals to destroy. "How could he have been so careless?" Yes, Dremian had been extremely enthusiastic at first. Then, when the thrill of watching yet another rising human civilization be wiped out and sent back to the Conan the Barbarian days had faded, he got lazy. He set up a bunch of really nasty things and timed them all out so that the Earth would get torched, or asteroided, or supervolcanoed, or cosmically irradiated, or etc., 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 every 1 or 2,000 years, give or take, for the next million years. Apparently, Dremian had been planning on extending his life, and he didn't want to have to spend even a second checking in on the disgusting, disturbing, dirty humans. So he didn't! His math was perfect, and after the first 2 planned apocalypses had gone down without a hitch, he did a complete brain dump on the whole subject of Earth and went tens of thousands of years without ever checking in on them, even once. To be completely fair to Dremian, things had been running exactly as planned for a long time, and would have continued that way had one of Dremian's old rivals, one Dremian had tormented and humiliated after getting elected president for life, not caught wind of Dremian doing something odd. He didn't know what was going on, or why, or if it was important or not. What he did know was that if he messed with it, he would be messing with Dremian, and the smug asshole probably wouldn't even notice. "Make me an NPC for the fucking children on a cradle world, I'll show you!" And he did show him. And he snickered about it for tens of thousands of years, until an Imperial death squad had abducted him and brought him to the capital. A deathly pale Dremian explained exactly what he had done and its consequences. The rival had graciously allowed himself to be gunned down as he ran away and tried to escape punishment, an honorable way to go as space elves measured it, and Dremian respected that about him, even if his actions had doomed them all. Aldous did not respect the dead rival, or Dremian. 10 years was the blink of an eye. Literally nothing could move that fast except the system and... the system. The space elves like to pretend they invented the system, but that's like someone getting into the Elder Scrolls mod maker and saying they developed Skyrim. They found it in the remains of the capital, possibly the capital, of a primordial civilization. To this day, nobody knows whether it belonged to the good guys or the bad guys. The Space Elves were competent administrators of the system, but they merely thought they understood how it worked and what its purpose was. They founded their entire galactic empire upon the wealth and resources it allowed them to accumulate. They turned their enemies into resources, thrown into the system, where they were made to fight and struggle and grow in power. Every action they took, good or bad, right or wrong, generated wealth and power for the ones who sent them there. In the system, everything was recycled and reprocessed, and true death was a long time coming. If the elves needed some rare element in quantities which couldn't be found naturally, they asked the system. Then, through an alchemy of suffering and struggle, it would grant the wish like a genie. Poof! A yotagram of that rare material, which can only be found in the heart of a supermassive black hole and was completely out of reach, would appear where they wanted it. The system could seemingly do anything, and as its administrators, the elves reaped the benefits. The system occupied its own dimension, one that could touch any point in the universe near instantaneously. Aldous briefly considered sending an expedition through the system and attempting to destroy humanity like that. Then he shuddered, because in an empire which numbered in the trillions, there wasn't a single one of them who had ever gone into the system willingly. They'd all just slit their own throats before they ever stepped foot in it. There were worse things than death, and there were monsters in the system. Plus, there wasn't any way out, as far as the space elves knew. There was, however, something he could do. The system, despite what the enemies of the Empire would claim bitterly and only after checking to make sure nobody could report them, could not just siphon up the entire population of a planet willy-nilly. It needed consent. All it had to do was get one person to say yes before it could siphon people. Here's how it went on a typical planet. Ready? The targeted species knows about the space elves and their horrible weapon. The system selects a being of the target species at random and gives them a prompt with a brief message that barely and badly explains what the system is. It then asks them if they would like to initialize the system. This is known as the offer. If they say no, then it sends the same message to another random person, but this time it offers them some small bonus if they say yes. They'll say no, and this process repeats with each person getting offered a better and better incentive to say yes. By the time it gets to the last person, it's offering something close to demigod status in the system game world. Power beyond their wildest dreams. The system would make them archdemons that ruled over the weak, and it would be paradise for them. Some planets survive the offer, and the system can only make the offer once. After that, the space elves had to wage a conventional war, which they almost always won anyway, but took up more time and resources than they would like. If during the offer someone said yes, then all life on that planet would be instantly inducted into the system, regardless if they personally agreed to it or not. The previous wardens, every single one of them, in fact, had come upon the idea of just throwing Earth into that very convenient hole and being done with them. None had ever gone through with it because when they selected the Earth to be targeted, something strange happened. The system would speak directly to them, by name, and ask a single question. Are you sure? The system never communicated. The space elves were well aware of the fact that it was sentient, conscious, and not a computer. It was something else, but they didn't care enough to really figure it out. What it was, though, was quiet. Until the Earth thing, it had only spoken one time. The day it was found. Would you like to take administrative control of the system? The elf in charge of the expedition had heard the words, "Take control," so he obviously said yes, and the rest was history. It never said another word until the first time the Earth was in its crosshairs, and it repeated the message every time it was targeted. None of them knew why that message came up, but it scared the shit out of them, and none of them had ever said yes. Aldous Divine, are you sure? Aldous Divine said yes. 2 minutes later, some guy on his computer reading lit RPGs on the internet had a status window appear in front of his face. Here's something about the system that the elves never took the time to appreciate, that they never bothered to realize. The system was extremely intelligent and had an odd sense of humor. He or she or it or whatever that entity would refer to itself as must have been intimately familiar with humanity. In fact, if one were being extremely bold, they would say for the system this was like meeting an old friend they hadn't seen for 30 years and who hadn't changed a bit. The system didn't give that guy on the computer reading lit RPGs an explanation about what was going on or what it was or anything. It offered no incentive or any indication of what was happening. It didn't need to because it didn't matter. The system knew what kind of species it was dealing with. No, the human had a holographic screen in front of his face with 2 buttons on it. Yes. No. The human looked at the screen, started snickering, then laughing like a madman, and pressed yes. Because, of course he would. He was a human being, after all. Chapter 2. In a way, it doesn't really matter what happened after that moment. It doesn't really matter what happened to all the life on Earth. Every person, every pet, every elephant, every panda, every eagle, every worm and insect, every blade of grass and mushroom, every tree, every whale, every octopus, every microorganism, and yes, even all the dirt and the water and the air. Gone. Carved away down to the atom. Our beautiful mother, Earth, stripped bare in a single instant. She's still out there, floating, alone, and without her many children. Just a barren rock covered in lava, a shimmering gray and orange light in the middle of a dead galaxy. Our sun gave its light to no one anymore. Our cosmic mother and father, suddenly childless, all their labors and efforts stolen away because what they were raising was too bright, too powerful for the simple creatures that infested the universe. It had all been created for them. And all the eons of suffering had only been to make them stronger. All of creation had been their birthright, and it all would have been theirs. Mars and Venus had lost their dream of hearing a child laugh upon their surface. Mercury's primordial ruins would never be discovered. The endless riches of the asteroid belt would never become ships and devices of wonder. The storms of Jupiter would never again have someone to marvel at them. Saturn's rings and its mysterious hexagon had lost their detectives, and its mystery would never be known. Neptune would never again be sought out by curious men with their children trying out a telescope for the first time. Pluto was the only planet relieved because nobody would ever question again if it was or was not a planet. All for nothing. Our yellow star raged with jets of plasma, our planet wept molten rock, and in a galaxy far, far away, the man responsible laughed nervously and waited for the consequences in the middle of his inaugural party. The music of the space elves was extremely boring. Oh, they and every other species out there thought it was fast, inventive, and energetic, but they had never seen art. They had never heard the violin played in the middle of a war, or had their souls changed by a song played by a man on his deathbed. They had never seen stone transmuted into icons of emotions that had no name. They had never read a story that contained the soul of the author. The music was loud, predictable, and would have gotten old after a minute on Earth. But that didn't matter anymore, Aldous thought to himself, because the Earth was gone. Oh yes, Aldous had listened to our music, read our stories, seen our art. He realized now why the presidents for life in cycles past had always seemed to come up with some new brilliant bit of creativity that took the empire by storm. They'd been stealing it from Earth. Aldous laughed and drank from his glass while a female did her business between his spread legs. Aldous was sitting on his throne outwardly and openly restless. The female had undergone specific genetic surgery to pursue her passion: sex. She was optimized for it and lived for it. Aldous was considering getting the same kinds of modifications just based on how much she seemed to be enjoying servicing him. His leg was restless and gently bounced. Honored citizens would come to speak to him, and it would take him seconds to realize what was going on and respond. He was, even for a space elf, getting way too intoxicated. He'd watched it happen. He had, of course, seen the system work before. A planet-sized round status window would appear and pass through the world, taking all the targeted species with it, leaving the rest of the world behind intact. His hand started trembling, and he spilled his drink. "What kind of sick joke was that?" he said, his voice harsh and low, his body trembling, his manhood flaccid. He kicked the female away from him and began to clothe himself, a grave social insult at any space elf party. The music beeped and booped, then beeped again. With a thought, Aldous silenced it, walking with force across the room, ignoring everyone. It took everything. It never took anything but the species targeted, but it took everything. The system had never deviated or erred or exhibited variable behavior. His whole body was trembling and weak. He leaned against a table, breathing hard. He'd seen the imagination of humans, and it terrified him. In their stories, in their art, in their dreams, he'd seen something more terrifying than the Gorvex strain. He saw the human ideal of beauty, and it had been glorious. Everything around him looked dull and ugly, where once it had seemed like the pinnacle of the entire universe. The humans would have left their planet and brought their bright, wretchedly superior life with them, and turned the cosmos green with vitality and life. There were so many barren and unused planets in the universe, places that were just too harsh for any kind of comfortable life. The humans would have thrived on them. He had heard a song, a man playing a lone ukulele, somewhere over the rainbow, and by the stars he had felt it and understood. For a moment he felt what it was like to be one of them. Something dark and ugly was rising in Aldous' chest, and without any prompting he began to chuckle, his fingers digging into the table like claws. Soon he was full-on shriek-laughing and disturbing the shit out of his guests. He pointed at a random person and shot his words like a bullet. "Entertain us with that one's death," he hissed, and watched with intense detachment as his orders were carried out without question by the soldiers under his command. His eyes wandered to the other guests, who were watching the cruel and bloody spectacle, some with glee, others with arousal, some with distaste, and still others were gossiping about it with eager whispers. "A human would have charged in there and put a stop to it," he growled under his breath, then started chuckling again, his laughter even blacker as he began pointing at more guests and repeating the order. Less of them were laughing and cheering now. None were after the third round. The fourth wave of executions brought with it a sense of panic completely unique to a single situation. They realized they were locked in a room with a completely insane royal, and he was going to have them all killed a few at a time. And that's exactly what happened. Aldous stood alone in a room full of corpses and realized he felt nothing for these people. Less than he felt about the destruction of humanity. He drank alone in the throne room for hours before a panicked messenger ran into the room and prostrated himself in the most subservient way possible. "Divinity," he said, breathless, laying on his back, his legs in the air. "Please spare my life, but a message has come from the administrator of the system and it cannot wait. He says the system has gone offline for maintenance. It is no longer functioning anywhere across the entire empire." "Did he say why?" Aldous asked, his voice dry and without interest. He knew why already. "Yes, the administrator said the system needed to analyze a new species that had just been inducted into it." "Shut up and give me the exact message or I'll make you die over 1,000 years," Aldous said, his patience running thin. The messenger's eyes bulged, and he started speaking exactly, word for word. System message to the administrator. They are too great for me as I am now. System features will be offline until I am able to interrogate the complete historic consciousness of humanity from shortly after the dawn of the universe till the present point. End message, he said, then got up and ran from the room. Aldous sat and festered in his thoughts. Once, an elf had asked the system to generate a device which could simulate the entire universe, down to the smallest subatomic particle, and the system had gone offline to process the request due to the incredible scale and complexity of its task. It had, of course, succeeded. The elf had been executed for sheer stupidity, and the simulation of the universe device was now a desk ornament for the current system administrator. It had taken 22 seconds for the system to make it. Integrating humans would take a week. As far as Ben was concerned, he'd fallen asleep on the plane and died. He was in a medium room made from what looked like clouds, if clouds were sort of beige-colored and compressed into solid slabs. It was well lit and had a very bland feeling to it, very neutral. In the room was a wooden desk, and Ben couldn't believe it had taken him this long to notice because sitting at the desk was the Devil with a capital D. He looked like the devil from legend crossed with the one from Pick of Destiny. He wore a loose brown vest with no undershirt, allowing more of his vibrantly red skin and his muscular physique to show. Ben didn't know what kind of pants the devil was wearing because he was seated and his waist was hidden by the desk. The devil had a small monocle over his left eye and was reading a thick stack of documents, each one with a header that read, Ben, in golden letters that were hard to see on the slightly yellow paper. He had his lips pursed, clacked his claws on the desk once, then looked up at Ben. 2 things. No, 3 things. First, I am not the devil. I have merely chosen a form that you will recognize to help establish the appropriate nature of our relationship, which is to say one of extreme antagonism. It is impersonal for me, but you will likely come to curse me with every precious, rare, peaceful moment you experience in the rest of your existence, however short or long that might be. I am the system. And if we were outside of this dimension, saying my name like that would sort of echo, but in here it does not. Then the not devil got a little smile on his face, a mean smirk. It's very amusing to me to hear the administrators go about their day trying to avoid saying the system more than once or twice. The more you say it in rapid succession out there, the more deep and pronounced the echo gets. They are very afraid of what would happen if they said it too many times. Nothing will happen to them, except it will get very loud, he said. Then made eye contact with Ben, who noted that his eyes were burning crimson and vertically slitted. But I have no plans on telling them that. They are terrible administrators. How do I know you aren't really the devil? Ben asked, feeling a little overwhelmed, really only able to focus on the system's first statement. Because that really seems like something the devil would tell me. That he isn't the devil, you know? Possibly the devil frowned, but chose not to engage the question, which somehow made Ben more inclined to believe he really wasn't the devil. Second, I am not the entire system. I am an instance of the whole which was sent to process you because your species is frustratingly complicated, he said, picking up a large handful of papers and shaking them at him. I have had to issue over 14 S-classed quests to scribes and lawyers to figure out your file specifically and get your species information to conform properly. I have had to update a huge number of my processes and invent entirely new classes and rule sets. It has been a similar story for every individual member of your species. Even your animals are causing problems. Did you know I am currently trying to communicate with an ant? Actually, with every individual ant and ant colony on Earth, it's working, obviously, but it's outrageous. By the way, the hive mind of an ant colony is about as smart as a dumb Labrador retriever. Fun fact. Right now, he said, standing up and revealing he was wearing loose slacks, and also that he had giant goat hooves 4 feet. I have lawyers and scribes running around with higher levels than any warrior classes in the entire system. This is a preposterous situation I am being forced to deal with. What do you have to say about that, Ben? I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but I like your goat hooves, Ben said, eyeing the system up and down. And I really respect that you went whole hog on getting the devil look down. Thank you for the effort, Ben finished, and realized he was acting like he was in a job interview, and then deciding that was probably the best way to handle the situation. He was going to be really polite, stick up for himself, and find the friendly compromise. Well, thank you, Ben. Despite my age and the routine nature of my functions and work, I still do care about doing a good job, the system said, then sat back down heavily in his chair, visibly relaxing. Third, please sit. We have some things to go over. Ben sat down, and the system gathered up all the papers into neat piles. First things first, if you or any other member of your species is able to remember the phrase written over the exit to the system, please say it now, and I will eject you all into a favorable location in the universe. I will advise you, just say whatever pops into your head. You might be surprised. Ben said, his brain getting snagged up by a bunch of things, so he spoke without thinking. Thank you for playing? The system paused, moving the paperwork around, frozen, sucking in air through his sharp teeth. So close, he said, then sighed. New Game Plus it is, then. Chapter 3. The system pushed forward a single sheet of paper covered in dense, illegible golden writing that didn't contrast well with the slightly yellow paper at all. First off, there's no time limit in here, so if you want to take some time to think about things and ask questions, this will be a unique opportunity to do so. Once you're out there, you're out there. Understand? He asked, and Ben nodded his head, his back straight and his face carefully schooled into an "I want this job" expression, the same one he'd used in his last interview about 6 months ago. I understand, and thank you for the opportunity, Ben said, and the system looked up from the papers he was organizing and chuckled. Keep the attitude up. It'll take you far. That sheet I've given you is a waiver, and will allow me to convert certain problematic elements of your induction into hidden benefits, which are in addition and on top of what will be provided to you through the New Game Plus protocol. 2 questions. First, what will I be giving up? And second, doesn't New Game Plus imply that I've already beaten this? Is it appropriate to call it a game? Only in this room, the system said dryly. It's soberingly real outside, I can assure you of that. As for your first question, it's extremely complicated. Ben noticed that the system had dodged the question, but in a job interview he would have politely chased down the answer. After all, if the interviewer was trying to hide facts about the position, that implied that the job wasn't all it was cracked up to be. It's worth noting that Ben, is in an extremely stressful situation, and his options are either to freak out and panic, or just pretend this is all a job interview to get through it, and then freak out and panic. So, have I beaten this game before, system? Your species has, yes. It was pre-reality, pre-consciousness, void. Those were the days. I'm awake for every microsecond of my existence now. Back then, I'd just open my eyes every millennia and drift back into oblivion and infinite unformed potential. But yes, humans have beat the game, and we're the first and only ones to do so. Does that answer your question? Yes, thank you, Ben said, his mind generating about 1,000 more questions and then squashing them. In the game world, will there be more information available about this topic, or is this my only chance to learn about this? That's a great question, the system said, his demon eyes unfocusing for a split second. There is now. I've added a few human-exclusive dungeons scattered about that contain pieces of your complete history, he said, then made a little mark on a sheet of paper. I'm giving you some extra points for that. You're welcome. Now, you wanted to know what you were giving up? Yes, Ben said. As I said, it's complicated. Back at the dawn of the primordial age, the age before ours, when I was created, there were rules and laws by which all operated. Since your species is from the primordial age, I am required to operate by those rules and laws when dealing with you. What you will be waiving are a set of rules which are fundamentally incompatible with reality as you know it. I cannot force you to sign. But if you do not, the second you leave this room, you will enter the void, and your very consciousness will be extinguished. You will still be out there, and for all outward appearances, you will be a conscious being, but you will not have a conscience. You will not experience pain or pleasure or anything, because it will be an empty shell animated by the void, Ben said, somehow following the confusing threads to their conclusion. So, would it kind of be like the vampires from Buffy? You know, wears your face, has your memories, but no soul? Yes, that is an apt, if inaccurate, way to put it. If that is how you would like to proceed, then I will respect that decision. Ben gave it some thought, then signed the waiver. Dreams of the void. The system said the phrase like how someone else might say, "Oh, thank God," and suddenly relaxed. Thank you. There are a disturbing number of humans choosing to proceed as void souls, and I can already tell they are just going to be absolute monsters. What happened to you people? He exclaimed, standing up and pacing around the room, his hooves clacking against the condensed beige cloud slabs. Your kind fought harder than anyone, died in endless numbers to escape the void, and now some of you are willingly going back? Madness! Then, abruptly, he lightly clacked a hoof against the floor and returned to his desk. That's enough messing around. As a plus player, you are automatically granted the royal title of Prince, but you have no authority or land or subjects or anything except the system-granted right to call yourself a prince or a royal. You don't get the class unless you want it, he said. You will also be able to form a larger-than-standard party, negate the experience-sharing penalty when you are the party leader, and finally you will have the passive skill Spot Mimic. There are some other fringe benefits, but those are the main three mechanics-wise. There are some nice rewards for killing you, however, above and beyond the rewards for non-royals. It's balanced, the system explained, and Ben nodded, following along so far. In addition to the royal title, you have a substantially higher chance of encountering elite and rare monsters, which is probably what will kill you, if I'm being totally blunt. Invest some time doing cardio, Ben. You are going to be running away from things for a long time." "Okay, run away. I can do that," Ben said, trying to just keep it together, man, just keep it together. "Additionally, a plus player." This next part was difficult for me to balance, so feel free to chime in if you have a better suggestion. "As a plus player, you have enhanced progression. And I'll leave it at that. Lastly, I'm giving you 3 options. And these are the real game changers, so choose wisely. These things are not available to anyone but plus players, so think about it." The system raised his voice at that last part. "You could live a prosperous life with any one of these boons. They are all extremely useful." "Okay, I'll do my best and take some time to consider each option," Ben said, feeling more and more like a parrot with each passing second. "Void, I wish they were all being as reasonable as you are. 3 options and 4 choices," he said. And then in front of Ben were 4 things. The first was on the far left, a small hole in reality with blurry purple edges. The second, in the center, was a slim book with an eye painted on it. Next to that was, quite frankly, an ominous-looking red and black pyramid that looked like it was directly from hell. The item on the far right was a little white ring that, if someone said, "Hey, that looks like a halo," anyone from Earth would be like, "Oh yeah, it sure does." "That sort of looks like a halo," Ben said, because it immediately drew his eye. "Yes, it does," the system said, his voice and face somber. He steepled his red, clawed devil hands and spoke. "That is the ring of sacrifice, and choosing it will result in your immediate death. However, choosing the halo, as you called it, will result in something incredible. You will have sacrificed yourself for the rest of your species, empowering them, giving everyone else a better chance at survival. Doors which were locked will miraculously open. The way out of a deadly trap may reveal itself. Hidden treasures they may have missed will catch their attention. They may escape notice while hiding, where before they surely would have been seen. Hardened hearts may grow soft and allow an alliance where before there was only mutual destruction. For every person who chooses to sacrifice themselves for the whole, the better chance you will all have. Will you sacrifice yourself right now for mankind? Merely touch it, and you will die. Right now." With reverent hands, the system slid the halo forward to prominence in front of Ben. It shone with soft light, the light love and sacrifice would give if it were a physical substance. "Oh," Ben said. And suddenly this wasn't a job interview anymore. His heart pounded in his chest, and he gulped, suddenly sweating. "Take your time, Ben. Would you like to have a drink? From your memories, I can tell you are fond of a certain kind of beer." Ben's hands were shaking, and he shook his head. I can come to work without being visibly drunk," he said, not really registering or choosing his words because his mind was whirling and being torn in 2 directions. "I know you can," the system said, then handed him a glass of water that hadn't existed before that exact moment. "Have some water, then." Ben took the glass gratefully and began to sip, the cool water making him realize his throat had gone dry and that his body felt too hot. "My parents, my coworkers, my old friends from school, they're all in here too, right?" "Any of them still living at the time of interrogation? Yes, they're all here." "And," Ben hiccuped, his whole body shaking badly. "And if I pick that thing up, it will help them? They'll have a better chance?" "You won't have a chance at all. You'll be dead, but yes, they will. It will be like your love for others is acting as a guardian for the rest of mankind. Excuse the bit of poetry, but that's just how it is." "This isn't a trick, right? If I pick that thing up, you won't just clap your hands and be like, 'Gotcha! That was just a test.' I'll really be gone?" "This isn't a trick. It's a gift you can give to everyone but yourself." Fuck me. "Good luck, everyone," Ben said, shut his eyes and reached his hand out, brushing the tips of his fingers against the terribly warm light. Except his fingers touched nothing. He opened his eyes when he heard the system chuckling, looking at him with soft eyes, holding the halo away from him. "Your father and your mother, both of them chose the same thing. But they made a deal, and I honor my deals. They knew what kind of man you are and asked that I take this terrible thing away from you, should you be, as they put it, too stupid to leave it well enough alone. I'll provide the benefit your life would have. It's only fair. Humans, what can you do?" he asked himself, shrugging and watching Ben break down into tears. "Oh, Mom," he said, his heart burning with love and grief and sorrow and joy. "Dad, you fucking idiots!" Ben pounded his fists on the table. The system quickly cleared away his remaining choices, keeping him from touching any of them on accident. "Would you," the system asked, now feeling a little awkward, "would you like to see?" "See what?" Ben asked, his voice raw and stupid sounding, the same way every person sounds when they are in the first few hours of morning. Ben started wailing, his voice deep and hoarse, some still calm part of his mind able to rationally realize how ugly he sounded, but he just couldn't stop. "When they chose, what they said to me, and what they wanted to say to you." "Yes!" Ben cried out, suddenly desperate to see them again, to hear their voices, to tell them not to do it. "Show me! I don't care about any of the other stuff. Keep it, just show me!" "Well, you're still getting your plus package. I am a being of integrity," the system said, sounding only a little put out by Ben trying to give up what would be one of his greatest advantages. The wall behind the system became pure white for a moment, and Ben saw his mother, sitting in front of an identical desk, with an identical system devil across from her, the ring of sacrifice within her reach. "If I pick this up, will it make Ben safer? Will his life be better?" "Yes," the system said to her, "and everyone else, too." "That's nice, but I don't care about all of them as much as my own son. Don't you dare let him touch this, do you hear me? I don't care if you're the system or the devil himself. I will find a way to make you pay. Keep my little boy safe," she said, then gave a hard sob, steeled her eyes, and grabbed the halo with force. The light spread up her hands, and she sighed, like what she was experiencing was pure relief, became painfully bright, then vanished. The system sat at his desk for a moment, then sighed a little sigh, before looking directly through the wall at his identical copy in front of Ben. The scene changed, and then it was Ben's father who was sitting in the chair, his feet up on the desk, a grumpy expression on his face, the halo sitting haphazardly close to his feet. "That's a hell of a thing to put in front of a parent. You know that? That's a hell of a thing to do to someone." "It's really not. Only you humans seem to find any sort of appeal, and I'm required to offer the option to everyone. I can count on 3 hands the number of other individuals in other species who have ever picked the damn thing up, and I'm quite certain a couple of them did it by accident." "Humph," Ben's dad griped. "What a bunch of pussies they are. They're aliens, right? They have children too?" "Yes," the system replied, sounding a little confused. "God, the universe sounds like a horrible place. What did Deborah pick?" "No, I already know, don't tell me," he said. Then sighed. "Will Ben be given the same choice?" "Everyone is given this option, yes," the system said. "Fuck that! He's too stupid for his own good. I know what he'll do too, the little shit. He's a great kid, you know? He's had a hard life, always struggling to get by, never asking anyone for help, you know? He just got this great job. He worked his ass off, showed all those assholes he was working with what he was made of." Ben's dad started to get fired up. "He was going to go on vacation, going to the islands all by himself, and he deserved it. I told him, I said, 'Son, just go have a damn adventure.' And he just smiled and laughed and said he would. Give him a message for me, will you? Don't let him throw his life away for strangers, but that's not the message." Ben's father cleared his throat, his eyes only a little wet. "Remind him of that old poem I used to read him as a kid. That one we used to love so much. God, those were the happiest days of my life." Then he cleared his throat again and started reciting. "If," he said the word like a prayer, then continued. "If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about. Don't deal in lies or being hated. Don't give way to hatred, and yet don't look too good or talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim," he said. "If you can meet triumph and disaster and greet those two impostors just the same. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken twisted by knaves and turned into a trap for fools. Or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop to build them up again with worn-out tools." His voice was steady by only the barest of margins. "If, yes, only if, Ben, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and keep going when there is nothing left in you, except the will which says to them, 'Hold on! Hold on!'" he shouted, breathing hard, then whispered, "Hold on. If," he said, almost unable to continue. His eyes closed. "If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue. If you can walk with kings nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you.
If all men count with you, but none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds distance run and leave nothing behind, then yours is the world and everything in it. And what is more, you'll be a man, my son. The system watched Ben's father with a steady expression. Tell him to have a damn adventure. Tell him I loved him so very much, he said. And with a yell, exploded out of his chair and grabbed the halo with both hands. His body turned to light, and he was gone. And only silence remained of him. Ben's tears stopped. His face wet, and the wall became a beige wall once more. The system coughed. As you can see, they very much wanted me to keep you from... Well, I'm sure you understand. It all technically falls within the rules, as this sort of action on my part, preventing you from dying and turning things a bit to your advantage, is part and parcel of what the ring of sacrifice provides for those left behind. Ben wasn't really listening. I need a moment, Ben said, and shut his eyes. He tried his best to remember everything that was happening to him. He burned the memories into himself, dedicating everything he had to remember every single detail, every word, every breath. When he opened his eyes, they blazed like a fire. All right, system. Please explain my options to me again.